Welcome to the 1000 Hours Outside podcast. I'm Jenny Urick, and we have lots of special guests with us today, which I'm super excited about. This is a podcast with Sam, or you might know him as SD Smith, the author of the Green Ember series, which we are just absolutely loving as a family. And then we have some other special guests with us today, and they are going to introduce themselves. We'll start with Josh.
My name is Joshua Schaefer. I'm 11 years old. I enjoy reading and playing sports. I want to be an author. My favorite Green Ember book is The Last Archer.
My name is Charlie Urick. I'm 10 years old. I really enjoy reading, playing Legos, and eating.
All right. Well, we're so happy to have everyone today. Josh, I'm going to have you introduce Sam for us.
SD Smith is the author of the Green Ember series, a best-selling middle-grade adventure saga. The Green Ember has reached hundreds of thousands of readers and spent time as the #1 best-selling audiobook in the world on Audible. Smith's stories are captivating readers across the globe who are hungry for new stories with an old soul. Enthusiastic families can't get enough of these kids. When he's not writing adventurous tales of rabbits with swords in his writing shed, dubbed the Forge, Smith loves to speak to audiences about storytelling, imagination, and seeing yourself as the character in the story. SD Smith lives in West Virginia with his wife and 4 kids.
All right. So I was just going to tell people, Sam, how we met. We met last month, although we had known about you already for a long time. Last month, or maybe a month before that, at the Cincinnati Great Homeschool Convention, and we arrived without enough reading material, which was a big deal for my kids. You know, we got there and I don't have anything to read. You know, they were supposed to pack their own stuff and didn't bring enough books. And so the conference was about to start, and I'm perusing, trying to find books for us to read. And we came over to your booth. I actually already had your first book, but we just had it, it was sitting on the shelf. We hadn't gotten to it yet. And all the kids were wanting to read your books, and I've got a stack of them here. So we bought the stack at the conference, and we actually bought 3 copies of the first book because we have 5 kids and everybody wanted to get started. And so they spent the weekend with their noses in the book. I mean, everywhere we were walking, they got the book up, and every restaurant, they've got their book up. So we were so thankful. And one of the things, I noticed a couple things. Obviously, your booth is always jam-packed, right? Every conference. There
tends to be, we draw a crowd, it seems like.
Draw a crowd every time. So you have this cool booth set up. We got some t-shirts, and the kids love the book. But one of the things I really noticed was that you had family there, and that really drew me in. You had kids and nieces. Your brother, I think you said, was there. And so one of the things for us as a family that we have been exploring over the last couple of years is involving kids in adult work, especially as they get older and older. And I was going to read this quote from this John Holt book, which is called Learning All the Time. And he says, children need to get some sense of the processes by which good work is done. The only way they can learn how much time and effort it takes to build, say, a table or to write a book, is to be able to see someone building a table from start to finish, or painting a picture, or repairing a bicycle, or writing a story, or whatever it may be. Adults must use the skills they have where children can see them. Then he says, in the unlikely event that they have no skills, which sometimes I think we feel like that, they can learn some and let the children see them learning. They should invite children to join them in using these skills. In this way, children can be drawn at higher and higher levels of energy, commitment, and skill into more and more serious and worthwhile adult activities. And so that was sort of what I got out of your booth, just sort of meeting you for the first time and seeing children there and helping and, learning how to use the different equipment. So we would love to hear about your family and how they're involved in what you do.
Thank you, Jenny. And thank you, Charlie and Josh. It's so cool to be talking to you guys and everyone who's listening. It's a real honor for me. Thanks for having me on. It's really encouraging. Your words are very encouraging. I saw some of the pictures of the kids, and I saw them sometimes there, like with the books, and that was really encouraging and sweet, and that means a lot to me. So thanks, you guys. And Josh, I'm looking for a hype man. So that, with that intro, man, I don't think you could take my brother Josiah usually does that for me, but I don't know, man, you could give him a run for his money. So just think about it, just be on standby, ready to come off the bench at any moment. Yeah, it was so cool to meet you guys. And we obviously knew about you. And we've got the 1,000 hours outside, charts going in our families. And I was like, oh, this is the person. This is the person. I was like, everyone was talking about that. So it was so cool to meet you and your family. You guys were so encouraging, and like, it was just an awesome start. There wasn't as many people at that conference as there usually are. So it was nice to just meet you guys right off the bat. That was very encouraging for us. And yeah, I think it was even my daughter who was like, tuned in. I think Anne was helping you guys there, and I think she was just like, you need to meet this lady, like, and she came over to me and she's like, you need to meet this lady, like, she's super nice, and she's like buying all kinds of books. And anyway, yeah, we're a team, just I think like you guys. And I agree so much with what you read there about, and I don't know how much of it for us is just sort of like culture versus sort of like intention. Like, definitely some intention, like we want to think about it. And I've always been a little bit of a like explain up, don't dumb down kind of a person. That's just kind of been my heart, like even just talking about big ideas, philosophy, theology, politics, or just statecraft or history. I've always been like, no, let's, like, we don't have to settle for sort of the lowest common denominator or whatever. Like, if you don't understand a word, like, let's just learn the word. Let's not live in ignorance and we'll all be dumber all the time. I understand when we've got to speak and contextualize, at times, and especially for young kids. But I'm always like I think for my storytelling, it harmonizes with my storytelling a lot, because my books are, they have a lot of respect for kids as readers. Like, I'm always like, if there's a decision between like, oh, make this super like low level so where everybody in the world can grasp it, or like go ahead and lean into this is like a little complicated, and like trust the kids to like to be able to sort of walk through that. I'm always lean towards the trust the kids and like respect them. And partly because I've met so many of my readers, and they're just like brilliant kids, like such a capacity for understanding that like blows me away. And so I'm always like, I don't know, my favorite authors did that. Madeline L'Engle really did that, like trust kids. Like, people told her, this Wrinkle in Time, it's like way too mature for kids. And she's like, well, I don't disagree. And, and she was proven right. And I think my favorite authors have always taken young readers very seriously. So yeah. And our family and our work, it's just like, it's hard to know where the lines are as far as like, what is a child labor, child slavery, and what is
right. Yeah, you don't want to take it that route, but just to be I think it's this concept of just being inclusive of kids, and that's sort of what we're trying to model even here. And these boys both just love your books, and we're excited to join in. But what I see as a culture is that kids are very siphoned off from the adult world. And that was kind of my experience. Not that it was awful or anything, but you spend these years in a school building, and you're kind of directed what to do, but you don't really see the behind the scenes. You don't really see what's going on. And so I really loved meeting your daughter. We came right before the conference started. It was like 5 minutes. I was in a rush. My kids are like, we're bored. Like, why didn't you bring anything to do? So desperately needing these books. And so I think it was Anne, trying to figure out the computer systems. And it was right at the beginning. So, just making sure that everything worked. And I thought, well, those are important skills, to have those experiences, to talk to people. And so it was something that really drew me into what you were doing right off the bat, because it's something that we haven't always thought about, but over the past couple of years have tried to think about more. I just want to say I really enjoy your books. You're talking about for drawing kids up, but, I'm like, well, I got to read these books, right? We're doing a podcast. So, so I'm up late reading. I'm drawn in, man, where like Heather's being chased by these wolves through these trees, and she's launching herself, and I'm like, I should go to sleep. sweet, but I'm just flipping pages. So I think that's a special skill to be able to write in a way that entertains both children and adults. It's not very common. So well done. Really enjoyed that.
Thank you. That's kind, Jenny. And it just harmonizes what we're talking about. Like, I don't think of it as like, oh, this is something that I will enjoy, and then this is something that the kids will enjoy, and I have to adapt it in this incredible way so that the kids, I just think like my kids and I mostly, there's a lot of things, even the best art I think out there, like you think about Pixar movies or something, like Pixar movies aren't just like, oh, an 8-year-old loves that, or a 5-year-old, it's like anybody. I'm 45 almost, and it's like I love it the same as my 9-year-old, and that's what that's my favorite kind of art, is the Chronicles of Narnia, that kind of thing. Like, who doesn't enjoy that? Like, I don't know if I would trust somebody who's like, no, that's too childish. Like, it's not too childish for me, for sure. And so I loved it, and I totally agree with your whole approach on involving kids. I think that's the best way to learn. It's so natural. It feels even if you're just thinking about education, it's like what is more powerful than being kind of walked through something together, sharing something together, and what is more like sort of empowering than to know as a child, like, yeah, we this family and our family business, like what we do as a family together, whether it's ministry or work, whatever, like we need you, and we're all in this together. And when we're cleaning up the house, whatever parts we're playing, they all matter, and they all have like dignity and worth and value. And you're 6 years old, but you contribute to this family, like you do, and that's the way you're loving and serving us, and we're loving and serving you. Yeah, we're all in this together. So I love your approach. I think it totally harmonizes with what we're trying to do in our home.
Yeah. So one of the things that we had said we were going to talk about is actually your childhood. When I look around, I see we have very career focused childhood practices where, starting from very young ages, sometimes even in the womb, we're playing the Mozart, and, we're really wanting our kids to get into these prestigious colleges, and we're spending a whole lot of childhood time and energy and effort and money on programs and these things. So, I think that people would maybe look at you and see the stack of books, and think, well, he must have gone to some prestigious thing and did all the things. And but you have a little bit of a different story. And so we'd love to hear sort of what you feel like from your childhood contributed to your success as an author and as a father.
Well, to summarize it, it would be thousands of hours outside, I think.
There we go. There we go. That's a good.
That's on brand, I know, but it's definitely true. And there are other, but it's funny because I wasn't a super literary kid. Like I learned to read and everything from a young age, and like a lot of people do. But I didn't practice reading. I didn't know culturally there weren't a lot of boys or men that I knew that were reading a whole lot. My dad did, and so did my papa and a few others. But I didn't have a lot of peers that were reading a lot. It was like, oh, that's something that the young girls did, which is so messed up. And I hate that. And so I love to hear, like, Charlie and Josh, I'm so glad you're here. And like every time I like connect with a young male reader, I'm like, yeah, because boys are just way behind girls still, even though it's probably better than it was when I was a kid. But anyway, but where I exercised sort of those imaginative muscles and really started really young. We lived really far back in the woods. We lived in a holler, as we call it in West Virginia, the hollow between two mountains. We lived back in the holler. And my dad used to joke that, well, I didn't know it was a joke when I was a kid, but he said that we lived so far back in the woods that no one lived behind us. And as a kid, I was always like, what? How is that? Is cool. Even sort of my like fantasy mind was like, wow, nobody lives behind us. And maybe I'll write a story about that someday. But we played out in the woods so much. And I didn't really put it together until later that I was already doing, like, sort of preparing for my vocation, because we were making things. I was making a fleet of paper airplanes, or sort of airplanes out of bark from trees, or fighter ships or something. And I was always playing something, enacting some kind of a drama in my mind, and I was building worlds and I was making things. So way before I was a wordsmith, I was a worldsmith. I was making worlds, and that's really what I do now. as like a full-time job. So it's kind of a cool job to kind of be able to continue the playing, stage of life. And I really feel I don't know, like relaxed and just sort of like I'm doing what I was put on earth to do when I'm telling stories, because it just feels so natural to me. It feels like childhood, and really boredom was a big key to that I know it's so hard for me now to not be bored because of this thing, because I've got access to like information and stimulus and news and anything at any time, entertainment, whatever. And it's just, there's a real downside, a real cost to that. And I think the gift of being bored as a kid, of being allowed to be bored a little bit, and forced, not in a cruel way. I don't think my parents looked at it as like, you need to be bored. I don't think they were thinking, they're just like, go play. That's normal for people. And we did that. And I think that was just so crucial. There's probably nothing that's been more formative for me as a storyteller and in my vocation than those early years of my life, being playing and imagination and going, running wild in the woods of West Virginia. That's just so powerful and formative.
Yeah, you can see it. You can see it in your storytelling, like with the Starseed game and, just the descriptors. And, you can see that this is a person who loved nature himself and, who found joy in simple things. I think as a society, there's just a lot of pressure to really fill all the spaces of childhood, to fill all the time. And that's sort of seen as or deemed as what's, the most important thing. This is making the boys really thirsty.
Yeah.
I mean, they're doing awesome. So
I'm drinking out of my water bottle from a Indian reservation in Montana. So
that's cool.
some beautiful outside stuff. So
And I think
on point.
Nowadays there's so many good things that you can enroll your kids in. I think it takes a lot of I don't know, a lot of backbone to not do it and to say, we're going to have downtime or just go play. It feels frivolous, but really awesome to hear your story. I heard and I read, I think, in a Stephen King biography that he didn't have a television until age 12. I thought that was interesting. It's like that storytelling comes out of this imaginative place. And so you wonder if things will be affected, 10, 20, 30 years down the road. If you have a generation of kids who haven't played like how you were able to play, if that's going to affect storytelling at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels, I totally agree with you that, and I'm glad you said that there's a lot of good things. It's not just like, terrible shows on TV or TikTok or whatever things that we as parents might be like concerned, like, we're doing, social media is doing this to our brains. And it's not just that. It's like, it could be like church or sports or
trumpet lessons, and then math tutoring, and then gymnastics, and then there's just no downtime.
We had to do that. We recently sort of pulled back from doing travel soccer. Like my kids love soccer. I love soccer. We're still involved. We still do rec and kind of local soccer kind of stuff. But we were traveling an awful lot, and it was good. And we like all those people. I just actually saw a lot of them last night at a game, a game in town here, and I like love those people, and I love that like it was a good culture, and it was like good for the kids in a lot of ways. But I believe it was a good decision for us to kind of pull back from that. Even though we had particularly one son who's just very, very talented soccer player who maybe has a future in it in some ways. And it's like, it'd be so tempting just to like, well, we're going to travel all the time for soccer and spend, a huge amount of time and money. And it's been, but it's been a gift to kind of pull back and not do that. And yeah, I'm just totally with you that there are so many gifts in just the saying no to things.
Yeah, that's really encouraging. I think parents will find it very encouraging to hear that your story, your success traces back to boredom. Traces back to
you can make them bored. They will write rabbit stories. It's a guarantee. We guarantee it on this, and you can get a refund from Jenny if it doesn't work. That's all I'm saying.
I love it. Okay, so the boys have some questions that they're going to ask you, and we've tried to prep them a little bit that they can talk back and forth if they have some other things that they think about. And so I'm going to turn it over to them for a little bit. I think Josh.
Awesome.
Oh, Charlie has the first one. Okay.
So, when did you know you wanted to become a writer?
Cool question, Charlie. Man, how old are you? Is that okay to ask?
Yeah, 10.
10. Okay. So I was a little bit younger than you. So it's a little bit weird because I wasn't reading a whole lot as a kid, as a young man. I did, but people would read to us, in school, or my mom would do that too. And so I had a teacher, Miss Geiner, who read us this book called Little Women. I don't know if you had a chance to read that one yet, Charlie. Yeah, it's so good. But so she read that book to us, and I totally loved it. It was awesome. She read it during school, and I love the character of Jo March. She's so crazy and does all kinds of cool stuff, and she's very active. So and she's very passionate. So, but she was a writer, right? And I guess before that, I had this sort of imagination of a writer as being like distant or like British, or like that. Me as sort of like a American country boy, like from West Virginia. I never knew anybody that was an author or anything like that, or so it kind of felt like, I was like an astronaut, or it's just something really distant. And but when I heard that story, I was like, I heard about Jo, and she was writing. I thought that was super cool. And then I don't know if it was the teacher, Miss Geiner, that told us that was Louisa May Alcott was kind of basing Jo on her own life. And so I got really interested in Louisa May Alcott, and she just felt closer to me. And so it felt attainable. Like I thought, oh, Louisa May Alcott, she's like me. She was a kid that grew up in America. And I don't know, for some reason that kind of made it more accessible to me. And then I was like, oh, well, that's something that people can do. Why would you do anything else? I really thought that, like, as a first grader. And so I would write little stories then. That's kind of how it began. And really that would come and go throughout my life. And I really didn't, start doing this more seriously probably till I was in my 30s, I guess. I'd spend some time. I was always doing some kind of creative thing, like poetry, or I used to write. I still kind of write songs. It was like a singer-songwriter kind of type. I did that for a long time, and there was always like stuff coming out of me, whether it's good or not. And but eventually, I sort of turned and really focused on writing and storytelling. But I sort of trace it back to that time. And I felt like almost like, I described the word haunted, even though we usually think of that as like a scary word, but I almost think of like being haunted by the vocation of a storyteller. That was sort of, I always liked that kind of thing in my play, in just my mind, and sometimes in actual writing itself. I would just always love that. That was always like rang my bells. So it's kind of a slow thing, but I think part of it started back there in first grade with Miss Geiner and Little Women.
Wow. It's interesting. I had read, there's this book called Rich Habits, Poor Habits. It's just about people's habits. And they have in there this test for parents, which whatever, I'm like, we don't care if our kids are rich, but you want to look at what are the habits of successful people. And one of the things they say is to read biographies, that parents, one of the rich habits is for parents to have their kids read biographies. And I thought that was interesting because I wouldn't have known from your story that you didn't start this set of books until in your 30s. What was your sort of career path? A lot of times we think like people just land, but no, this is a journey. What was your career path up until that point?
Yeah. That's a great, that is a great insight. I feel like that's so powerful because I know a lot of authors now, and it's like it's always this zigzaggy kind of a thing, and it's never straight. And I'd be curious to hear about how you landed, kind of what you're doing now, and how that. I'm sure that probably wasn't a straight line. Like I always knew where I was going to.
I think
yeah,
a lot longer than what people think. They see you on a podcast or they see you at a conference, but don't know that there's a decade plus of time behind that. So I am curious. So, what was your career up until,
So,
what were you doing?
My last job. So I almost think of like all the jobs I had before as kind of like jobs, and they weren't necessarily like the vocations of my heart. They were good, and my dad always taught me that all work was honorable work. So I had a job cleaning toilets at like gas stations and stuff. I've worked at fast food. I've worked at this is all kind of through college and stuff. And I worked was a drug treatment counselor for a while. I worked at Sam's Club for a while. I worked at a bearing company where I delivered like bearings and gears and sprockets to like coal mines and things. My last job was for about 10 years. I was in adult education. I would do like testing and assessment, kind of like the GED, for folks who were trying to transition from welfare to work. So that was my last kind of job. And that was a good job for me in a lot of ways. I enjoyed it. It was a good opportunity for me to help people. And I drove all over the state of West Virginia and had a lot of time to kind of think and in the car and listen to stories and things. So that was a good job. But yeah, I only left I've only been doing this full time for probably, I don't know, maybe 4 years, something like that.
Oh, wow. Oh, I didn't realize it was that.
So I'm brand new at it, really. We're just getting started with it, and yeah, people say that to me too. Like they see you, whatever. Oh, you're on a, you're selling books or you're being interviewed or whatever. There's always that kind of like, and a lot of young authors are like, I want to do what you did. Like, tell me how to do it. And I'm always like, you do not want that. Like,
Yeah,
you need to. We all need our own journey, our own pain, because there's so much has to do with pain and conflict and challenges, and to prepare you to have the capacity to tell the kinds of stories that resonate with people in this like heartfelt way. So yeah, you don't want to trade with me, but you do your thing, what you're called to do, and I'm sure that's the best path to go.
I think the message is that it can be a zigzaggy path. It doesn't have to be a straight shot, and that we take life day by day, and and life goes on a journey, and that's part of the beauty of it.
Yeah.
Josh, you're up.
How do you deal with writer's block?
Josh, writer's block. You're triggering me, man. This is a trigger question. This is a good one. This might be controversial. Yeah, who knows? This could be the place where the podcast takes a downward turn. Here's my theory, man. And I don't know, I'd love to hear what you think about this, but I do not believe in writer's block. Like I think that writers are weird people, like in a way, like in a good way. Like I think you have to be a little bit wild to be a writer, because it's a really audacious thing to do. I'm going to sit and invest a huge amount of time in putting symbols onto a page or onto a flashing screen from my mind, and then I expect that to be printed into a book or some kind of device or audio, and then I want other people to spend their time engaging with my thoughts and my words. It's super audacious, maybe a little bit arrogant. I think you almost have to cultivate a little bit of but I think a lot of the cool things in life, like, if you're going to try to be an astronaut, if you're going to try to play in the NBA or whatever, like those are all sort of like audacious things to do. And like the people who do it are just like, well, I'm just going to try it anyway. I'm just going to go for it. And so I like people like that. And I am one of those people. But I do think like we try to, this is a big subject that I could talk about. I'm going to try to limit myself because I could talk about it a long time, but I do kind of believe that for me, I have like sort of a worldview that I think is sort of really deeply informed by my faith as a Christian. So I think about my vocation as sort of like two things that as a storyteller, it's like this really magical thing that's really beautiful and incredible and kind of glorious and miraculous. And it's like, wow, how does this happen? Like my experience with reading C.S. Lewis or Louisa May Alcott or Madeleine L'Engle or these people are like Jane Austen, whatever. I'm just like eating it up, and it's this, I'm transported, and it's this real magical thing. So like, it's really important to hold on to that with one hand. But then I have this other hand that's like really important too, which is, it's just an ordinary vocation, like that's rooted in love and service. Like it's not, I don't feel you're not superior to someone who makes meatloaf for kids. Like that's a great job. You're serving people and loving or cleaning toilets, which I've done. I don't feel superior to like the plumber or the pastor or the teacher or the dad or the mom or I just don't, that's like, we're all in the same kind of business. We're just like doing things for other people. So I find it holding those two things a little bit, maybe in tension at the same time. Like I never, ever want to let go of that this is like a service industry job and that I'm not like superior. This isn't my ticket to become a culturally elite or something like that. No, this is like making PB&J for kids. Like that's genuinely how I feel about it. Like I want to make a really good sandwich, but it's, people are eating it. And so I really hold that, but I also never want to lose track of the fact that it is kind of a magical thing. It's really special. So I hold those things in tension a little bit, and I don't want to like downplay either one, because I believe both are really true. So it's a little bit of like a paradox or a mystery. But in that, like, I think sometimes when we're too heavy on the sort of like, this is magical and amazing, we sort of tend to be very self-indulgent about it. Like, well, I'm a precious author and an artist, therefore the rules don't apply to me, which is sometimes it can be really bad. Like, I can be a jerk, I can be really mean to people because I'm an artist, and that's how we are. That's our temperament. Like, no, all the same rules about like being kind to your neighbor, they still apply to you if you're a best-selling author or an artist or whatever. Like, you can't just be, the rules aren't different for you and me. So I tend to think of like, if you're a plumber. And I just was helping a guy in my house who's working on our washing machine, and he can't come in the morning and just say like, I'm sorry, I've got like washer repairman block, so I can't show up and do this today. Or like, if I had surgery on my knee a few years ago, like I can't just show up there and the surgeon's like, I'm sorry, I've got surgeon's block today, so I can't do it. Or I've got mom's block today, so I'm sorry, I won't be able to be your mother today, so you'll have to. Like, we don't, what other job or vocation are you allowed to do that in? And I just think like, so part of me is like, that may be a little bit too harsh, but I think that that's kind of a good way to think. Like, I think that we would be better as authors if we just more or less thought like, I'm here to do a job, and it's it's special. Like, when the muse shows up, it's really, really magical and incredible. There's like fairy dust, all kinds of crazy stuff's happening. It's really cool. But also like, hey, I'm serving a meal, so I'm showing up for that. And so that it's been helped me a lot to not indulge in like, oh, I could have writer's block. That means I don't have to write. I think that usually means something else is going on, and we need to work through it, and we need to fight through it, and not indulge like, oh, I now have an excuse not to do something. Because writers are the worst, man. We will find any excuse not to write, because writing is crazy and it's super hard. It's fun, and if you're a kid and it's just fun, like, just go with that as long as you can. But it's like hard work, you got to sit down and do work. So we'll do all kinds of other stuff, like I need to do research, I need to do an outline, I need to build up my characters, or I need to think through this, we'll do a million things that are not writing, and really we need to write. We need to show up and write. And so that's the hardest thing to do. And so I'm just like a little bit hesitant to say like, oh, we're special, we get to have writer's block. I'm more on the side of like, hey man, just show up and do your job. So what I do for writer's block is I just I beat it up and leave it for dead in an alley, and try to. But that's actually my favorite quotation about this. And I'll finally shut up about your question, which is an awesome question, Josh. Is Jack London, who said, you can't wait for inspiration, you have to go after it with a club. And that's how I feel. Is like, if you're waiting for inspiration, or waiting for the timing to be right, or waiting for your feelings to be good, or everything like or the house to be quiet, or for circumstances to be good, or to have enough money, or what, like, guess what, you're waiting forever. So you got to go, don't wait, go after it with a club.
Do you ever wish you could go back and change some of the details of a storyline?
Yes. Do I ever wish I could go back? Oh yeah, I do. And honestly, because I'm my own publisher, I have done that a little bit. And, you find some mistakes in some of your books sometimes, and so then you go back and you obviously fix those. So a couple of times I've done a little bit of George Lucasing. He kind of went back and messed with Star Wars a little bit, which nobody liked. But yeah, I've done a little bit of that, just kind of not a whole lot. But if something was really egregious, like I did something that was just really bad as far as like grammar, or just a section where the dialogue tags are dumb or something, like I've gone back and fixed some of that stuff. But generally speaking, no. Like, the truth is, The Green Ember was the first book I wrote that was published, we put out there. And I've written, I've written probably 12 books since then, and they're all better than the Green Ember. And some of them aren't out yet, but I'm getting better. Like, you get better at stuff, but you just can't start where you're going to be. That's another reason why I'm working on a course right now for writers called the Green Writer. And that's the whole thing about it. Is part of that, what we were just talking about is like, is the whole, like, I am not waiting. Like I have a green light, I'm going. And so I'm not waiting for permission. I'm not waiting for all this stuff. I'm going as a writer. That's me. I'm a green writer. But I'm also growing. Like I'm not yet what I will be. So I'm like a green living thing. I'm going, I'm growing. So that's part of my ethos is like, so a big part of it is like, I don't really need to go back and change it. That's who I was, but I couldn't get to where I am now without that. And that's totally fine. I needed those moments of growth. So the big picture, I've fixed some things here and there, but I'm done with that. And those were pretty minor, to be honest. But my main posture is like, no, that's what it is. And people fell in love with that book. And so that's what they're going to get. I don't need a new version of that. I'd rather spend my time writing more books and sharing more stuff. Good question.
Well, so Josh's mom is in the room. She's like on the other side of the screen. And so as soon as you brought up the Green Writer, she picked up her phone. She's like writing that down. Is that available yet? Or is that available now? Or is that a newer thing?
It's coming soon. It's coming soon. Sort of, it's sort of the answer to the question. Like I've gotten just so many questions from mostly kids about like, what advice do you have for me as a writer? And it's kind of like a really first, and I wrote a book like during 2020 with it, and then I was like, this would make a kind of a good course. So we filmed it. We're ready. It's hopefully it'll be out pretty soon. We'll be working on it. Yeah, if you have I'll announce it in my newsletter and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I'm really excited to share it. I think I'm kind of really invested in these young storytellers and young writers. Like what do I don't have everything they need, but I've got something, and I want to share with them. So I'm excited to share that.
That's exciting. All right, Josh, what you got?
How long does it take to write a book?
12 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. Man, I don't know. It so depends. Some of my books are short, some are short-ish, some of them are long. Some of them have taken, the Green Ember, I think, took like maybe a year and a half total in time. The actual writing of the book was probably eight or 9 months. My father got really sick right in the middle of when I was writing that book, and that's another thing, man. That book, it was amazing it ever came out, because there's just so much crazy stuff was going on in life. I was really, really busy. I had 2 jobs and young kids, coaching soccer, involved in my church. My dad he had pancreatic cancer, was really sick in the hospital for a long time. And so we were it's almost like a miracle that book ever was any good at all, 1, and then 2, ever saw the light of day. It's kind of amazing. But that's like kind of another story. But yeah, so sometimes like, I think Ember Rising took like 3 months or so in its first draft. And it's my longest book. So it's just weird. The Last Archer I wrote really, really fast, like maybe 2 weeks or something. But that's a really short book. And then some of them take like 6 months or 9 months. It's really, I would say if it was an average, it would probably be something like 6 to 8 months. But it seems like if I can get devoted time, it's quite a bit quicker than that. That's hard to find.
Not all that long.
Yeah.
They each have one last question here.
How do you
Awesome.
come up with different character names?
Coming up with the different character names. Initially, Heather and Pickett, my main characters in the Green Ember series, were named Joe and Hannah, and they were kind of named after my kids, Anne and Josiah, who you guys met. It's kind of confusing because I have a brother named Josiah who works with me, and it's funny, Jane, you were talking about family. Like our family business is like me and my brother Josiah and our brother-in-law Andrew. That's like the 3 of us are like work together, and then our wives, my sister, all the kids, my daughter Anne, she's working for us a lot. She does a lot of work. Josiah, my son, he designed that, like, I don't know if you saw the big display with all the art on it. Like he's 15 years old. He designed that. He and I are working on a series together right now. We're writing a book series together. So yeah, we're totally in that like all in family thing. And now I forgot your question, Charlie. What did I? Oh,
Character names.
What
How do you
was
come
it?
up with the character names?
Oh, character names.
Some of them are real normal, like a Heather, and then some of them are really out there.
So I think I started talking about that because the story started with my family, like started with my kids. And so they were really little when I started telling those stories to my kids. So Nora or Anne was just like a little toddler kind of a thing. And now she's 18. So I started telling them outside. Before I wrote the books, they were tell out stories. And so I told him, I was like, oh, this one's Hannah, his older sister, kind of like Anne. And then there's Joe, kind of like Josiah. But it wasn't very long before I was like, I don't want them to, every time these characters do something dumb or like make a bad, I didn't want them to think I was having like a commentary on their life. I wanted them to have freedom in enjoying the story. So pretty early on, we changed the names. And I just liked Heather and Pickett because they sound like cool rabbit names. I just love those. And then really the names, my rule for names is I hate it when I'm reading, especially like a fantasy book, and I can't pronounce the name of a character, and I'm like, and then they came to golf, and every time I stop and I'm like, what is that? That's so frustrating to me. So I wanted it to be hospitable. I didn't want kids to have to stop. So even if I use like a normal name, I almost like spell it even more simply. So most of the names in the books, if not all of them, should be pretty easy to read for almost any kind of reader. And then it was just like, does it sound cool? And occasionally I'll be name somebody after a character, like my brother-in-law. His name's Josh Hanks, and I love him. He's a great guy. And so I would always call him Joe Shanks, like because his name's Josh Hanks. I always call him Joe Shanks. So the character of Joe Shanks, who first appears in a small way in the Green Ember, but has like a lot bigger role going forward in the series. Like he just came from just a goofy nickname that I had for my brother-in-law. And every once in a while there'd be something like that. But usually it's not something from the real world. Usually it's just like, does this make sense in this world? I'm like super committed to the whole, like, don't get outside of it. Like, don't try to sneak in some kind of lesson where people are reading it and they're like, oh, I see what he's talking about, this controversy. Like, I just wanted it to be real in that world, like very Tolkien-esque, as far as like, I want people to feel, because I believe it like fully. I want that I feel like the readers, I want you to like not be thinking all the time, like, what's he really mean? Or is this a stand-in for this? Like, there's no allegory or anything. It's just, if it rings your bells, spiritually or philosophically or whatever, like, that's great. It does for me. But the story is very like genuine. It's very like, this is what's happening in here. And so that was a super long answer to a question.
No, it's interesting to have the mix. So like a Heather and Pickett, it's like when you have the mix, it kind of keeps you in both, right? Like you like to have the names like Lord Rake or these other characters that are not normal names, right? Necessarily.
Yeah.
Normal is arbitrary. Are you thinking of one? Helmer, right? Or I've never met a Helmer, or so it keeps you in that fantasy land. It takes you to another place. But then also nice to have it mixed with a Heather, because a Heather or whatever.
Yeah. But you think about Heather, like the rabbits like love Heather, like to play in the Heather. So it's a very natural name. It's like, it's not something. Yeah. And even Helmer, like names, and even a lot of those characters, like the character of Helmer, like he was just there when the kids came into the main characters came into Cloud Mountain in the Green Ember. This isn't a spoiler, but he was just there. And then I was like, well, who's this guy and what's his story? And so it's like a process of discovery and curiosity for me. And that curiosity led so much to the fact that even when you get to the Wreck and Rise of Whitsun Mariner, which is a story that happens a long time before, it's like a prequel, long ago prequel sort of a thing, that the name of Helmer is still being explored, like where that came from all the way back in that story. Like there's all these connections that lead from curiosity in the books, and a lot of that has to do with names. So I love names. I'm like a big name person. So I do think about it, I do care about it, but it has to feel like right in the world. I don't want to like insert too much. I don't want people to be thinking like, oh, that name means this in Hebrew, or that. I don't want really people to be doing that. I wanted to kind of leave it in this world.
Which book was your favorite to write?
Which book was my favorite to write? Let's see here. It's pretty so a lot of people, that's cool. That's a cool way to ask it. That helps me, because a lot of people just say like, which book is your favorite? And that's a little bit different than what was your favorite to write, or what's the best one, I think, because those might all have different answers. Because the Green Ember is special to me in a lot of ways, because it was so special between me and my kids. So it has a really special thing, but I don't think it's the best one. I think my favorite one to write still has been, and even like the last one, Ember's End, it means so much to me because of what I got to do in it. I got to finish this story that I was so grateful to be able to like finish this Heather and Pickett's journey. But my favorite one to write was Ember Rising, the third of the big books, the main series, and that's partly because that's right when I quit my job, and at that time I had the freedom of just coming out here to the forge every day, which is like 10 feet from my house. It's like an old garden shed that we just turned into an office. So I come out here to the forge, and that was my only job. I worked on the book, and I wasn't thinking too much about commerce, or like I was just trying to devote myself to it. And I did that, and I built a fire pit for my family, which I'm not super handy, but have a friend's tractor, and we would out there, and I would, have those big rocks, and I was laying it's kind of like a 30-foot diameter place. We had to level it off, and it was just like a lot of physical work, which was really good for me, like emotionally, healthy wise, like just being outside and doing that work was like, it was good for me. And then writing the book, those were like the two things I was doing, and kind of taking walks with the kids and playing soccer with them and stuff. So that period was so special to me, and I just loved that book. I loved it, and I just enjoyed it so much. I loved getting into Heather does so much in that book. There's sort of Heather and Pickett are separated a little bit, and they kind of go on these different adventures. And it wasn't the last book, and it wasn't the second book. So, the second book, you have a little bit of like pressure, because it's like, oh, okay, the Green Ember was good. People enjoyed that, but maybe it's going to go downhill. Maybe you'll have the sophomore slump. Maybe you can't do a series. Maybe it's just going to be like one good book and people will kind of forget the rest. So there was a little bit of pressure with that. And then when you're wrapping up the series, the fourth book, there's a lot of pressure on that, because it's like, oh, you got to tie up these loose ends, or people are going to be, there's a little bit more pressure. But with that book, I just did it, man. I just went for it and let it go. And it's long, and I wrote it pretty quickly. And I had joy every day writing that book. It was such a fun experience. I loved it so much.
That's awesome. Did any of this spark any other questions that you guys have?
Who is your favorite character in the book series?
All right, Charlie, I gotta turn that back on you, man. What about you? You tell me, who's your favorite character so far?
I really like Helmer.
Helmer, yeah. How about you, Josh?
Helmer too. Yeah.
Helmer, okay. Dude, Helmer is like such a popular character everywhere, and it's so funny because he's so mean, and he does have like an interesting arc, which I think people identify with, but people love him, and like he's so I don't know, he has a long way to go. I guess maybe people enjoy that, but he's up there for me for sure. But I think Heather's probably my favorite. I just love her. She's the most like me. I think she's kind of an older sibling, very responsible and like doing the right thing, but has a lot of fear about actually like executing on her own vocation. But she's got a lot of compassion, but she's really strong in some ways, but she's also just deals with anxiety and fear and stuff too. So I relate to her an awful lot. And so she's probably my favorite character.
Well, we're wrapping it up here in a couple minutes. I wanted to share a Bible verse, and not all of our listeners are Bible readers, but this is just a beautiful verse, and I think the Bible is filled with beautiful things and a beautiful way to live our lives. And so this is Proverbs 10:17, and it reminded me of you when we first met. It says, "He who heeds instruction and correction is not only himself in the way of life, but also is a way of life for others." So he who heeds instruction and correction is not only himself in the way of life, but also is a way of life for others. And it just reminded me, I think, when I saw your booth and I saw all the people there and I saw your extended family and your own children, that it's very clear that you are a way of life for others, in addition to being in the way of life for yourself. And so, I was very inspired by you and your family and your story. And so if people are wanting to find more about you, if they're wanting to buy your books, if they're interested in the green, did you call it the Green Writer
Yeah.
Green writer course, like, my friend here, Stephanie, she's already trying to write it down, where, can you tell us, like, where can people find you? What's the best way and all that stuff?
Well, thank you, Jenny. That's such a kind thing to say. What a beautiful verse, and my goodness, what a blessing to give to me. Thank you. That is, that would definitely be a prayer that if I want that to happen. I want that to be the case. I'm open to that. I want the Lord to give gifts to other people through the work I'm doing, and gifts that lead to life. So that blows me away. It's so kind. For finding me, it's pretty easy. It's just sdsmith.com is probably the main place. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and I've got a newsletter, and you can get the one thing that might be like an easy, I try to make my big marketing scheme, which is for years, people are like, how are, these books are doing really well. What's your marketing plan? I'm like, marketing plan? What are you talking about? Like, I think my marketing plan for the beginning was like, let a bunch of cool moms and families and kids like tell each other about the book, like, and not like go stop them. That's, we really, our sales force has been like families. It's not because we're so clever or anything, which has been so cool and such an awesome gift. But so we try to remove obstacles and try to make it easy. So you can get the Green Ember audiobook if you want, just for signing up for my newsletter, which I don't send it too often.
Wow.
So you can get that for free just by going to sdsmith.com. I think it's /update. Or maybe /free audio. I think that's another way you can get it. And there's some ways to, so if you're kind of just curious and you want to have a low barrier for entry, that's a way to go there. So, but sdsmith.com, easy place to find me.
That's really a great offer for someone to be able to listen to the book, going heading into the school year. I'm in the first one, and I just have so enjoyed it. So I'm planning on reading them all, and we got a lot of friends that love them. Are there movies on the horizon? Is that ever?
Yeah, I think that's a good possibility. To be honest, we've spent a lot of time over the last few months talking to a lot of people and listening to different opportunities, and it's like a lot of other things. We're not in a big hurry on that. We're not desperate. I feel like we want to, these are my babies, these stories, and so I'm pretty persnickety about just partnering with anybody. I'm not desperate to have a movie or show made. I'd like to do it, but it's got to be the right fit. And I can't be too precious or too perfectionist. I got to remember Jack London, got to go after it and just keep going. But yeah, I'd say that's a decent possibility that'll be on the horizon.
Well, can we end, Sam, with a favorite outdoor childhood memory of yours?
Sure. Well, yeah, boy, a lot comes to mind. The first one that just pops into my head, I should probably just go with that. And that is, we lived in the holler. There were a lot of acres. When I was 12, we moved to South Africa. Parents were missionaries, and so we left. But we were like really. We loved South Africa and we loved being there, but we're always West Virginia people. Like, that's kind of in our blood. And so spending time, this was like an indelible memory for me as a kid, and it's pretty simple, but we were playing, I think, Army or something. That's what we usually did. And we would often break a stick into like the shape of a rifle or something. And we were reenacting some kind of a thing. A lot of boys. There were four of us boys and one girl. And she was the baby, so she was young. But we'd have swords, so we'd do swords or guns or whatever. We were going out and we were playing kind of in this intense kind of war game kind of a thing. And I remember wandering from the group a little bit and coming through this kind of a canopy of trees that I'd never been before, a place I'd never been before, and coming through this sort of like a barrier of bushes, and walking through it and into this place that had rocks, and it seemed enormous to me, but I'm sure it was pretty small. Rocks and moss, and it was soft, and there was a little bit of dew in there, I don't know how, and there was kind of a light shining through and a kind of a mist, almost like a rainbow inside this little, it was just like this almost a little canopy it was like a little fantasy canopy, and I can remember even as a child that it arrested me and filled me with feelings that I didn't know how to express. But it was awe, reverence, gratitude. It was really an encounter with beauty that was really that I'll never forget.
It sounds like you're describing a chapter in your book.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah. I think that was. It was kind of a beautiful haunting, kind of in a positive way, and just it always stayed with me. Like there's the world has a capacity for beauty that can be so surprising and reverent and glorious. And it was modest too. It was kind of small, but it was which is in my heart a lot. I like small, I like thinking small, and kind of like everybody's like, I want to do everything in the whole world, and like, oh, maybe just like love your brother. Like that would be really nice. Like that would be a good start. So I'm a big fan of like doing the small things
And how simple things, little plates. Yeah. Well, Sam, this has just been such an absolute pleasure. Thanks for hanging out with me and with Charlie and Josh. Charlie and Josh, thanks for joining in. I think it's really special that you guys were here and spent this time with us. And Sam, we'll continue to spread the word. Just love your books and really excited about this great writer course as well. So thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you guys. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Josh. It was such a pleasure to be with you guys today.